there's a lot of faffing around. Like any process of manufacturing or prototyping or anything, it's something that you have to do many times over to get right. It's not a quick process and it's not an easy process. In every sci-fi movie, you see this thing where it's like, oh, they can 3D print something, and it's like, and it's done. It's like half a second. No. It takes a long time.
Welcome to Cycling Demystified, brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry.
Welcome back to Cycling Demystified. We're back in the room with, me?
And the other two clowns.
Oh, all right, you know us all by now. Anyway, we're back with another episode. This week we're talking about 3D printing within the bike industry. Fizik have just released their new custom 3D printed saddle service, which is called the Eye of the Cycling World. So we thought it would be apt to talk about all things 3D printed, from everything from 3D shoes to 3D lugs, bikes, small parts, maybe even a whole bike. But what it is it useful? Why should we be paying attention to it? What's the future? And why all the magpies have got really excited about this new 3D printed saddle service. Or are they? Are they excited? I think there's been a mixed bag of reviews so far.
I think the momentum is slightly running out for gimmicks in the bike industry.
Really? Yeah. I thought the whole bike industry was based on
I think
gimmicks.
The whole bike industry is based on gimmicks, and now I think enough people who work in the bike industry like us are educating our customers to realise, that, and they still want it.
That's such a novel thought.
I know.
That couldn't be further from the truth.
We're trying to educate.
So this
people.
is what Ev says and what Ev means. We're educating the great and the good about what is necessary and valuable in the bike industry. What the reality is, we're three grumpy old blokes in a room who are harking back to an age of nostalgia where things worked.
I think you've been spending too much time around us, Ev.
I think so, yeah. I've become cynical to the extreme.
Cynical? Reasoning?
Cynical and reasonable.
You're not a cynic, mate. You're a realist.
That's what I like to call myself.
Well, it's because you got to fix everything every day, things that break.
And when things break, that's when you see the limitations of gimmicks.
Well, it's still like a young process, I would say, 3D printing.
Is it a fad? Is it a gimmick? Or is there actually some usefulness to the premise of 3D printing?
Yeah. I reckon 3D printing is here to stay, for sure.
In what capacity?
I think it will be the future. At some point in the future, I reckon you'll be able to... I think bike fitters will still be around, but there'll be a shop somewhere where you can step into a booth, you stand on a little thing, and they will weigh you, scan you, do everything, poke you.
That already exists. Sell Italian, mate.
It doesn't work.
It costs €15,000.
Yeah, this would cost
45?
like even more.
Do you 45?
Wasn't it like something ridiculous?
It was obscene
like
amount of
40
money.
grand.
Yeah, mate, the future's here. I've seen it on GCN.
Anyway, you're going to be able to be scanned as a human being, and then someone will 3D print you a bike, and you can test ride it and ride out the shop in like 15 minutes.
And it'll be bad.
But then you'll be able to come back, and then they'll just print you another one.
I have another comment on this, but maybe I'll let you finish.
Yeah, that was it. That's the future.
You've been
I'm
watching
seeing.
too much science fiction. So the discrepancy between these things being useful and actually working, and then there's this disconnect between what people have seen in the movies as compared to what we're actually capable of. So in every sci-fi movie, you see this thing where it's like, oh, they can 3D print something, and it's like, and it's done. It's like half a second. No. No, it takes a long time. It messes up. The machines are not that reliable, and there's a lot of faffing around, right? Like any process of manufacturing or prototyping or anything, it's something that you have to do many times over to get right. And it's not a quick process, and it's not an easy process.
So before we start bashing it too soon, because we're like 3 minutes in, what is it good for?
Prototyping.
Exactly.
You can own a 3D printer. You can have a small, workshop or something. You can own your own 3D printer, and you can 3D print plastic parts and various other polymers and things like that. Well, polymer is plastic, but and if you've got a bigger one, you've got a bigger, slightly more industrial scale one, you can 3D print metals like titanium, stuff like that, because obviously they need heat, they need a lot more power and stuff like that. But it's very good for prototyping because you don't have to, smelt iron ore or anything like that and kind of like, create casts and molds and things like that, and that's even more of an involved process. But when you make molds, they tend to last for many. You can use them many times, but it's expense and it takes a lot of skill and a lot of resources.
Like a carbon fiber mold for a bike is like 10 grand a piece.
Yeah. So the ability to actually design something in a 3D software and then just hit a button, and I know it's not as easy as that, but you hit a button and it will print it, and it might take a day or 12 hours or something like that, but you can print this thing, and then you have to take it out of the printer, and you have to file it down, and you have to do all sorts of things. It doesn't come out like ready to go. It's a bit like an Airfix kit, if anyone knows what Airfix is anymore, right? You got all the plastic pieces, but they were all connected in from came out of a mold, and you had to use an X-Acto knife to take everything apart, and then you have to put it all together, and then you'd have to file things, and then you have to paint it and put stickers on and decals and things like that. And it's the same principle. It takes work, but you can do it on a much smaller scale. You can do a one-off, right, which is perfect for prototyping. You can print something, you can get it wrong, and then you can go back to the drawing board, and relatively quickly you can improve and iterate relatively cost effectively.
So we're seeing lots of small bike parts that are already 3D printed, whether it's computer mounts or little widgets here and there.
And if you notice, they're pretty crappy looking compared to something that has been made at scale using molds and properly manufactured. Then they're not great, but it does enable you to create shapes and do things, print things, three-dimensional objects that as a one-off. So you've got small-scale businesses, like one person in their bedroom, effectively, who can manufacture you something pretty custom that they can sell to you.
Well, there's levels, isn't there?
Yeah.
So you get some like ghetto computer mount that's made out of Play-Doh,
Yeah.
and you try and attach it to your stem that some bloke in his shed's 3D printed to.
Yeah.
And then you scale that up to like the dropouts on Fairlight's bikes, are 3D printed by Bentley up in Yorkshire, and they're really nice. So that's kind of like the next scale, like small batch bespoke, like really kind of well finished, but more of an industrial scale.
But why are they well finished? Because somebody has painstakingly finished them.
Yeah, exactly.
They haven't just come out of the 3D printer like that. It doesn't work that way.
Exactly. So there's levels to it. And I think that's kind of with any manufacturing process, you have to kind of appreciate that the tool is only as good as the operator.
But then this is the dream, isn't it? We're working towards a dream, the Star Trek dream of hitting the button and the 3D printed bike comes out, because you just how you like it, and then if you don't like it, then it just kind of disappears and remelds, and you
it's
can
a
do
dream.
Yeah, but like you
Science
gotta have
fiction. That's why the term fiction exists.
You gotta have the dream in order to get there.
It's nice to think about.
But I think understanding its limitations as well is important.
Well, that's the key, understanding that it's a tool to do a job, and if you use it
do the wrong job.
To do the wrong. If you try and if you try and shoehorn it in to do something that's not really designed to do, it's like trying to get your body to ride a bike that doesn't fit you. It's just like it's not gonna work.
Yeah. So I don't know. Have you guys ever been like early adopters of anything? You know,
I know what I like and I like what I know.
Yeah. So you know, this is where maybe the difference is.
Yeah. Again, I hate to wheel out the old privileged entitlement thing, but early adopters are people with too much money.
I don't have the money to be an early
Exactly.
adopter, right?
With the rest of us, we wait and see. Yeah. We're like, I'm not going to upgrade to Windows 11 quite yet because we want to see it crash and burn first, and then they'll improve it, and then we'll, don't want to brick our laptops.
But yeah, I think there is mileage in that early adopters, they do have access to things that maybe the rest of us don't. Yeah, money, basically.
I mean, Ganner's 3D printed bike, right? They 3D printed for the AL record.
Yeah, but he didn't buy that.
No,
did he?
No,
he didn't pay for it.
No.
They did it in order to prove that they could do it and to try to, it's easier for them, but again, because with a one-off like that, they can 3D print it probably quicker than they could have it manufactured or create a mold or something like that.
Yeah. So what I'll be interested to see is, have Fizik brought something new and innovative and that works to the table with their custom 3D printed, carbon 3D printed saddles? Yes, Matthew.
How much does this new Fizik saddle cost, Way?
Oh, I think they're about 500 quid. I think. Is that right? Yeah.
459.
459.
How much does the equivalent saddle made by hand cost?
I mean, like a normal 3D printed saddle, just an off-the-shelf one, is around about that price with carbon rails and stuff.
Yeah, I take proper umbrage to that.
Yeah.
but going back to your point, it's like this early adoption of this 3D custom saddle service comes at a premium, right? And the whole point I thought of 3D printing was to speed up the manufacturing process and make it easier to manufacture, i.e. cheaper, and yet 3D stuff seems to be more expensive than the non-3D stuff.
Yeah, because there's a reason that manufacturing at scale uses certain processes, and that's not 3D printing. Because 3D printing is designed for prototyping.
Yeah, because it's
and
new.
It's very good at doing that. So these 3D printed saddles, they initially probably were never designed to be sold to the masses. They were designed that the designers could just create a saddle in software, print it, and have a prototype to then take to the factory and say, we want it to be this shape, and we want it to do this, and we want it to look like this.
So do we think this is what Fizik are doing and they're barking up the tree of, this isn't for you, this is for the people who are not you?
Probably.
Well, I think that they have to go through this process in order to get to a finished product that actually works at scale. And they're kind of pioneering this. So in some senses, it's like R&D for them.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the whole point of a custom 3D printed saddle is the fact that it is not at scale. It's one of one.
Yeah. But also that manufacturing process, if it becomes like normal, that a normal saddle is a 3D printed saddle that, everybody has.
I'm out.
Then,
All right, so what are the advantages of a 3D printed saddle over a traditional saddle?
Well, this is where we get into...
I'm not going to talk for the next 5 minutes.
Well, this is a very interesting question. So, is there actually any advantage to having a 3D printed saddle which is customized to you or not? And I guess you have to go through the process, and maybe it depends on your point of view. And I'll just go into a little bit of what the Fizik process allows you to do. Is they basically put a pressure mapping pad on a saddle, get you to ride on that, get the pressure map from there, and then from that they can create a 3D printed saddle with differing levels of firmness in different areas of the saddle based on that pressure map.
Question.
You said you weren't going to talk for like...
No, this is a genuine question. So they say they put you on a saddle with a
Yeah.
pressure mapping on it.
Yeah.
This saddle obviously has a predetermined shape. It is one of maybe 3 shapes.
Aye.
What if that shape doesn't work for you?
Well, this is the point we're getting to. So this kind of process, the idea behind it is that there is a limit to how much customization there is around the saddle. And speaking to another bike fitter about this process, his point was that there is so much hype and expectation around these kind of 3D printed products that the marketing departments of these kind of companies put out, that expectation is like super high. It's like the whole idea that they're trying to sell is that this is going to be the perfect saddle for you, full stop, and that's it.
And that's impossible.
And yeah, there's
Not
just...
unless you believe it.
Well, it's just far more complicated than, or the determinant of that perfect saddle is far more complicated than simply throwing you on a bike with a pressure mapping kind of system and then creating a saddle from that pressure mapping system. Because as young Matthew here has alluded to, you know, it's a complex equation of...
And also, this is the thing about sort of pressure mapping, is that it's not taking into account any feedback from the customer.
That's certainly one thing that could be a kind of roadblock in there. Like, you know, if you have a customer who's just told that, oh, look, the lights all go green on the pressure mapping system.
So you are comfortable.
Yeah, this
and
is
the
going to be
customer's
the
like,
best
well,
for
but I'm
you.
not, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so there is all that, as well as the fact that you would, I suppose, if you had the perfect system, which was you scan somebody's arse, and then you along with them actually like pedaling dynamics and everything like that, and then you 3D printed the perfect saddle shape for them, then Fizik end up creating a Pro Logo or SMP saddle shape because that's what suits that customer, and then suddenly there's a legal wrangle because they're like, you know, all the other companies are like, well, yeah, but you've just your saddle has accidentally ended up copying our saddle design.
I think that's where the limitation is. They still have to start with a base shape of some kind.
That's the point.
And they're still flogging that dead horse, or should we say bull?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That was a very in joke. If anyone gets that, then you're a real geek in terms of...
I appreciated that.
Get in touch in the comments, people.
Yeah. But that's the point, is it? It's like if you understand where the limitation is, and then you can make a better informed decision about whether you want to adopt this technology or not.
Yeah.
So if you know, for instance, that these shapes do not work for you, having tested these similar shapes in the past, then chances are a 3D printed top to the saddle probably isn't going to make it that much better. So understanding the limitations of the technology, its implication, and all that kind of stuff can help inform your decision, and probably save you 460 quid.
Yeah, I think just the fact that the saddle is 3D printed and is quite custom doesn't necessarily make it any better. The question is really, is it better for you in your circumstances? And the other big kind of elephant in the room is that, okay, you may, let's say, you sit on the pressure mapping system and it shows that you sit more on one side than the other, you have more pressure on one side than the other. Then the question is, well, why? Why do you sit more to one side than the other, rather than simply just printing you a saddle which is maybe a bit squishier on the side that you kind of lean into more, or maybe it's the opposite, it's a bit firmer on one side than the other, one side of the saddle than the other. So it doesn't resolve the actual reason or root cause of the saddle. It's a band-aid, like,
it's just going to exacerbate your imbalance.
Well, it completely depends on why you have that imbalance. Yeah. And, well, the secret is that everybody's imbalanced. Everybody's wonky. Sorry, everybody, but you're not a robot. You're not the same on both sides. Yeah. So do you actually need that kind of differential in your saddle? And what happens if things change? I'm sure there are plenty of
spend another 490 quid on them.
Yeah. It's like selling the dream for no reason really.
Do you know where my mind went here? This new 3D printing malarkey.
Yeah.
It's essentially the modern take on a leather saddle.
Oh, Brooks is coming back.
But it is, isn't it?
Can you 3D print leather?
Well, no, but the whole like what Wei was just saying about the saddle being tuned to your needs. Yeah. If you're tuning it wonky, or if it's adapting to your body wonky, then you have much more of a mountain to climb to achieve better symmetry on the bike. If you're compensating for asymmetries by compounding asymmetries. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it does to us.
No, yeah. And when I say it, does this make sense, I'm questioning my own cohesion rather than your understanding. Okay. And that's kind of...
No offence taken.
And that's true in a bike fit as well, because I say that a lot.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm saying?
I absolutely get what you say. So it sounds like we have debunked the idea that 3D printing is a good idea for a saddle. What is...
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Well,
I genuinely think there is a place for 3D printed saddles, right?
Where?
Where, in certain instances, whereby you can tune the firmness of the top of the saddle. And if you get an instance whereby, so for instance, I'll use an example that there is a very popular saddle that we really like by a very large bike manufacturer that everybody knows and loves.
Yeah.
And they do the same shells, but with a regular kind of top, gel top, and a 3D printed top. And if you get a shape where it works really well for a rider, but there's maybe a bit too much pressure in certain parts of the saddle, usually towards the nose, if you get someone with very good pelvic rotation that can hinge forward from the hips, they can rotate their pelvis, but they maybe have a bit too much and they need something a little softer on that kind of like very kind of forward point of their pelvis. Yeah. The 3D printed version of that saddle can sometimes work really well because it is very soft at that nose. So there is definitely a time and a place for 3D printed saddles. I'm not sure this version is, but there is definitely a place for those 3D printed honeycomb kind of shapes.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a place for it in fairly rare circumstances, which is where 3D printing comes into its own, because you can create a one-off product specifically for somebody. So it will always be expensive.
It will always be more expensive
because it's custom.
Because
the nature of it.
It's not custom.
Not you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think just to clarify that there is a difference between custom 3D printed and then just simply 3D printed, where there is a predetermined kind of shape, layout, firmness, wherever it is, and so just the. Yeah, there's just different saddles for different circumstances.
Exactly.
And, the promise of one saddle to rule them all, again, it's a unicorn, looking to be.
But this is it. It's like, and it goes the other way as well. Sometimes you get a shape that someone's happy on, you put them on the 3D printed version, and it doesn't work for them. No go.
Yeah. And things change.
So just like traditional saddles, and there are loads of them from loads of different manufacturers, and all the different manufacturers make loads of different shapes, loads of different levels of padding and everything. All of that stuff already exists. You just have to have the experience to be able to grab one off the wall and say, let's try this and see how it goes. You have
Well,
to test
it's not just experience as well. It's like it's listening to
your
feedback
body.
that you're getting
Yeah.
from both, in a fit context.
Yeah.
We're listening to the feedback we're getting from a rider,
Yeah.
but also listening to the feedback you're getting from your body as well.
Exactly.
I mean, we've
yeah.
talked about this, so if people haven't listened to it already, you should go back and listen to our previous episode, which was part of the 10 pillars of bike fitting on how to choose a saddle, and that will kind of inform basically everything we'll be talking about, like how do you go about that kind of process of choosing a saddle. So I think we need to applaud Fizik for kind of going ahead and kind of trying to pioneer this kind of technology, but I think they've taken it to
a new level.
So
By
Specialized
trying
started
to create a shortcut for people to satisfy their short-term.
Do you know what it is though? It's like when you're at school sports day and you say you compete with a lot of heart. It's like we applaud the effort,
I thought you were going to say you forgot your PE kit.
not so much the execution,
All right, I see, yeah.
perhaps.
Yes, okay.
But
Well done, Fizik, for the
saddles
effort.
aren't the only application of 3D printing.
So are there some
In
applications
bikes.
that make more sense?
Well, I think like Way, you've had some very exciting 3D printed stuff come through in the past few weeks, haven't you?
Yeah, so I've been spending the last few weeks testing some 3D printed shoes, which are pretty wild. And I'm pretty excited about these. I haven't finished testing them, so I can't pull together any conclusions, but I'd definitely say watch this space. I've been testing some Lore 3D printed shoes, so if anyone hasn't seen them yet, go check them out, Lore. And essentially what happened was that someone came along, put me on scanner, 3D printed 3D scanner.
Let's tell the folks what happened before.
Oh, well,
the chap came along with his 3D printed
Well, again, it's like a long road to development. So, these guys, again, are pioneering, and it takes a long time to get all this stuff right. And Ev, you are absolutely right. This stuff takes a lot of effort. And, their first kind of efforts didn't really create the best results. They're trying to make things easy for the end user, but like the kind of technology wasn't quite there. So I'm trying to 3D scan my feet using just an iPhone and some, it just wasn't, it just didn't get some good results. But they came up with like a really interesting scanning solution in the end, which did work really well. And then I think they're on version 2 now of their shoes. So it's been over 2 or 3 years now of like kind of development essentially, and they're getting into an end product, which is pretty innovative as well. It doesn't function in the same way as a normal cycling shoe would do. And if you look at some of the YouTube videos of other bike fitters out there, namely Colby Pierce and Neil Stanbury, they've already put out some videos about how the shoes work. And you'll see, if you look at the shoes, they look pretty wild. like nothing you've ever seen on your feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nothing you've ever seen.
Yeah, nothing you've ever seen on your feet.
Unless you've been in a hospital recently.
Yeah. But it's almost like a cast for your foot. And that kind of 3D scan allows a shell to be made around your foot that kind of holds your foot through the ankle and kind of higher up the ankle than you normally would do with a traditional shoe. So that gives another layer of stability and control through the pedal stroke, which you normally wouldn't do. Now this produces all kinds of other challenges within that kind of process. So again, we're just going through the process of refining kind of where and how to apply the 3D scan to an algorithm that allows you to accommodate a whole foot that actually moves rather than just a static scan. And I think that is the challenge. And so if they can get it right and there's enough adjustability and movement within the shoe itself, then I think they're onto a winner. But again, it's such a gargantuan effort to kind of make this work, and it's such a massive learning process that at the moment it's requiring, I would imagine, a lot of investment for, not that much output at the moment. But and with any new technology, you got to have like someone to back you and to put in that kind of initial effort to kind of make this work.
But in terms of the tech, like the 3D printing tech, like this, I can't think. I mean, I'm not the brightest spark, but I can't think of another way that this would be possible without the ability to 3D print from that initial scan. Because this is like every pair of shoes that Law produce is uniquely custom.
Yeah.
So without that technology of having a 3D printer to be able to bring those scans to life, it would take so much longer than it even does to get those shoes into the real world and on the feet of riders.
Because like people have produced custom-made shoes for donkey's years, but actually they've always been a bit hit and miss. And the molding, you still have to go through a pretty arduous molding process. You have to take plaster casts of your feet and so on, and then you have to rely on the skill of that kind of fitter to kind of make the shoes just how you want it to. Whereas if you can find an iterative 3D process where you can scan from one side of the world, send that scan to a print shop on the other side of the world, print you some shoes relatively quickly, ship them over to you, test them out. If they're not quite right, then the idea is that you should be able to 3D print another one pretty quickly. So again, that's the dream. But when we get there, then
I'm seeing an issue.
There's plenty of issues,
which is the say it's using technology to do something that can already be done by hand. So all you're doing with a 3D scan of a foot is the same thing that you do when you take a mold of a foot.
Yeah, but I think this is where these shoes are slightly different in that they are creating shoes that are different from anything else that are out there in the known world.
So the process of creating the shoe is different, but the process of getting the information that they use in order to create that final shoe is effectively the same. Whereas what you really should be doing is 3D scanning an animation of the foot under load.
Yeah.
And that way you would see
that's the next level,
that's the next step, really.
Like doing the scan dynamically.
So the important part of this whole process, really, again, because we're talking about 3D printing, but it's just, like we keep saying, it's just a tool. That's just the end process of creating something that somebody could do by hand, but it's quicker, and somebody doesn't necessarily need the skill to do it. The important part is the scanning or the mold to understand what you need in order to get the information to create.
Absolutely correct.
That's where this potentially falls down. It's not the actual 3D printing where it falls down. It's the...
And it seems that it's like maybe actually like as much as we like poo-poo pressure mapping, like saddle pressure mapping and stuff like that, at least that is looking at the motion.
Yeah, it's dynamic.
It's dynamic.
Yeah, so, but again, you gotta start. Yeah, you gotta start somewhere.
You gotta start somewhere, and three-dimensional scanning with full motion is still a little bit more difficult.
Well, the other challenge is you've got bike in the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so one of the challenges we had with scanning originally was interference with the scan.
Yeah.
So you put another object in the way.
Yeah, but again, technology will get to a point where you can kind of do that. But yeah, absolutely, that scan is like the be all and everything of, how good the quality of, I mean, I talked to the guys at Law and they said that every shoe that didn't turn out well was down to a poor scan. because like the foot was at a funny angle or like kind of loaded in a funny kind of way, and so their algorithm didn't take into account, you know, that kind of part of the movement. But then this is the interesting part of testing these shoes, is whether or not there's enough accommodation to deal with the dynamic part of the testing of the shoes.
And that's where you need a brain to come into that equation, to start to look at stuff and to understand the nuances of what you're actually, you know, creating. I mean, where a computer can't do that. They can pretend they can do that. You can't do that.
But I
Computers
think
don't.
This is the difference between, say, Law and their approach to 3D printing and Fizik. And, you know, like, I'm sure there'll be some great value in the Fizik model, but they're essentially, I think they're trying to stay ahead of the game of like their other saddle competitors, just with another, I don't know, bit of technology, rather than really creating something better or really understanding what makes a better kind of saddle.
You know, with every sort of like large scale sort of marketer, their remit is number one to make money from selling these things.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's not necessarily in their interest. They're not there to help.
The bike industry does not have your best interests at heart.
Yeah, there are a few smaller companies that really do care about their product, because their whole marketing, the idea of their marketing is the fact that they actually do things to help improve quality of life. But there are also a lot of companies out there that don't give two shits around.
Well, I don't know. Each goes hand in hand, right? You know, innovation goes hand in hand with business. You can't have one without the other. Like, business fuels innovation, innovation fuels business, etc., etc. So, and I think there is, you know, with everyone who's making stuff, I would hope that they are making stuff because they are trying to help people. There is a better way of doing things. Whether or not they get there or not, that's another question. But you know, I feel like 3D printing is it's a technology that's very immature at the moment.
Yeah.
And so
people are still trying to find their feet.
Oh,
get it?
So we're still trying to find where those kind of limits are and so on. And at the moment, it's probably the preserve of like the elite, where we're seeing these things, you know.
That's where a lot of these innovations come from, is like elite level sport, where they have the money and they have the budget to be able to try prototypes and try things at the elite level.
Yeah.
And then if it does work, it trickles down eventually to the consumer.
But the dream is that 3D printing becomes like this very iterable or replicable kind of process, far more than like kind of any other manufacturing process. So it should become more democratized in that sense. Anyway, in the end. But I mean, we see some in 3D printed lugs, like Sturdy, Quirk, Bastion. They're all using 3D printed lugs. I mean,
yes,
the fact that their bikes are all silly expensive is another thing.
Well, this is the thing. It's like it is the preserve of those who have.
It's
not
much cheaper to get cast lugs and things like that, and it's like the expense, the extra expense for what is mostly an aesthetic choice rather than necessarily a functional thing, is the preserve of those people who got the cashola.
Yeah, I'd love to ride one of those bikes just to see how they felt, if there is any kind of value in the 3D printing this. But certainly from like a manufacturing point of view, like they make total sense from my point of view. Like if you're a small, like kind of...
If you're small scale,
small scale, you know, bike frame builder, you know, you're always limited by your time and how much you can make. If you have a 3D printed lug and then like simple tubes that you just kind of bond into, those lugs rather than or weld into the lugs in terms of
they speed up the process.
it speeds up the process. It's much easier than having to hand file and miter all the joins and so on specifically for each different size, and so you can kind of create bikes which are of great quality at a much quicker scale. Or you can go down the Bastion route and just go like super high end.
I mean, when money is no object, you can do whatever you want.
Sure.
But if any of these technologies are going to be useful in the long term, they have to be financially viable at scale as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that it's just a ways off for something like 3D printing.
Yeah, but I think that the hope is that these small manufacturers can show that it can be done, and then it just takes some investment capital, someone to come in and like kind of take hold of that kind of process and kind of scale it up and be like, okay, now we can. I mean, actually, Specialized have essentially done something similar with their aluminium bikes, where they have essentially molded or cast. I can't remember which one, how exactly they do it, but they cast
the alley.
the head tube and the bottom bracket junctions.
It's the lugged style frame, except instead of slotting a tube into a lug, you're just welding it together.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like the joins are in a different place, but it makes it easier to cut tubes to length and stuff like that. Which is a great idea, but aesthetically, people see the joins in a different place, and then they're kind of like, people are really torn with stuff like that. I think it's fine, but some people are really torn. But I wonder how much of it is obviously like to be cost effective, to be cheaper and quicker to manufacture, but also to kind of emulate the aesthetic of the carbon fiber monocoque construction bikes. I think that's what. When you show somebody something that's smooth and flowy, it makes them think that it's more high end, and their money's being better spent somehow. Which isn't necessarily the case, but it does look nice.
But I tell you what, like the new Specialized aluminium bikes, they look banging.
Yeah.
They look like they're lightweight, they perform well, geometry's dialed, and they're a cracking price.
Aluminium is the best metal to make a bike out of.
Yeah, well, it is right into that one.
It is the best material in terms of metals that you could choose to make a bike frame out of by a country mile.
Ooh, I think that's another podcast right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's quite. I don't often get excited by Specialized stuff, but like their aluminium offerings at the moment are pretty interesting.
The new full suspension chisel looks sick.
Yeah. But like the aluminium crux as well looks amazing. Like if I had to buy one bike that could do it all, then that might be one of the contenders.
If I'm buying an off-road bike, it's going to be made of aluminium.
And it's going to have flat bars.
Anyway.
And suspension.
It is, it makes sense.
Not necessarily suspension, but...
It makes sense for a suspension bike to be made of aluminium because you tend to get a much stiffer frame.
Exactly.
But it's quite lightweight. And then if you've got suspension anyway, it doesn't matter that it's really stiff.
Exactly.
Because you've got the give, right? Yeah. Whereas maybe for a road bike, alloy isn't. It's good for a race bike. It's good for a crit bike because you're not spending that long in the saddle. But they are pretty stiff.
Yeah, but now we're all running wider tyres.
Yeah, it doesn't actually matter that much.
You've got a bit more cush for the
If
push.
you've got everything else is like compliant carbon, and by compliant I mean flexible.
Cheap.
Well, it's not cheap. It's expensive, and the more flexible you want it, the more expensive it is. Yeah. But if you've got an alloy alley sprint, which is an awesome frame,
so stiff,
super stiff, but carbon everything else, and slightly bigger tires than 28s, 30s, whatever. You get a pretty solid bike.
Yeah. And the other frame manufacturer is called Frameworks.
This is your new favourite thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's 3D
printed lugs.
No,
are they titanium?
It's CNC machined
lugs.
Yeah. But like how cleanly those lugs seem to come out the machine, and how quickly he can iterate different lugs is incredible. Like, he can just, computer program. So, even though it's not 3D printed, it's kind of 3D CNC machine. It's kind of the same kind of
it's kind of the same
Variations on a
concept.
theme, isn't it?
It's you take a 3D model and the computer can create it using the CNC machine.
So if you can find a way of like iterating very quickly, as you would do, like as you're prototyping, then you're one step ahead of everybody else. And so I feel like this is kind of where the future is in terms of.
But we notice the theme here. A lot of this is with metal.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, yeah. I guess the lugged parts of it, either 3D printed in metal, titanium, or CNC machined out of aluminium billet. Then, like.
Well, I mean, carbon fiber. It was always. It's like a very, very long fad, right? Because what they did was when it came along, they were like, this is the wonder material, this is better than anything else, you should only use this, and everyone's like, carbon, carbon, carbon. And it is great, it's really good, and if you use it in the right way, it's brilliant. It's light, it's stiff at the same time as being a little bit flexible in one direction and not in others. But you can do the same thing with metal. You can do exactly the same thing with metal, as long as it's malleable enough when it's hot to be able to extrude it and whatever. So it's like the idea that aluminium was like the cheap option and carbon is the expensive, fancy option. It's like you just got to know how to use it well. And if you use it well, you end up with actually a really good bike. And as we all know, the frame is the bottom of the pile when it comes to how important your stuff on your bike is. The fit is way more important. The components that you put on it, the wheels, all of that other stuff. Frame's literally just a hanger. Pretty much all it is. It's not that important what material it's made of. It's not going to make that much of a difference.
My road bike's a clothes horse.
Oh man, we need to talk to some frame manufacturers and designers to see what they say. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like 3D printing has got a way to go.
It's not going anywhere, is it?
No. It's a very good method of prototyping and being able to iterate relatively quickly. The traditional ways of, sculpting stuff out of clay and then scanning that and then making it again or putting, whatever, there's lots of different methods of doing that. But also, you've got people who had a certain skill set are being sort of superseded by people who don't necessarily have that skill set. So it's good if you have the skill set to do things in a traditional fashion, and then you start to use new technology that makes your life a little bit easier. But the danger is with all new technology is that somebody comes along and thinks, oh, that's cool technology, I'll use that to jump, to bunny hop the people that were doing it in a traditional method, but they don't have the experience.
The danger is you lose the skill.
Well, exactly.
That's
what I was trying to say in a very long-winded way. It's like
supposedly frame building has been listed as what's it called?
It's on the endangered species.
Yeah, it's an endangered skill. List.
Well, without a doubt, because
it's very easy to do badly.
But maybe this is just the iteration of like kind of manufacturing. It's we don't ride, I don't know, Brook saddles for a reason. Things have to move on at scale and things like that. So, it's always great to have the preserve.
But the important thing is to remember how these things came to fruition. And if you understand how things were done traditionally, you'll do a better job of doing it with any modern technology rather than try to, again, run before you can crawl.
Yeah, which is why Matt's analogy of Fizik saddles, the new 3D saddles, are actually just a throwback to kind of Brook saddles. And I think
It's the wolf in the red cloak.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think the thought we want to leave you with is really just look before you leap. Have a little research before the shiny 3D object is purchased. Try and have some awareness for whether or not this 3D printed object is actually what you need. Is it going to serve you a purpose? Or if you're feeling super flush, just go get it.
You've got 460 quid burning a hole in your pocket. Crack on.
I mean, I'm sure there's some people out there with that. So just go for it.
Right.
All right. Till next time, guys. Ta-ra!
Here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell all your friends about me. At Cycling Demystified on Instagram. Tell everyone. And leave us a review on your podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, whatever. That would help us out a lot. Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Wei or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time.